A man storms into Judge Caprio's courtroom, the sound of his heavy boots echoing off the marble floor. His face is set in defiance, his eyes sharp with the kind of arrogance that makes an entire room fall silent. The courtroom clerk barely finishes reading his name when he raises his voice and says, "Save it. I'm not paying a cent." The air shifts instantly. Every whisper fades, every head turns. Even Judge Caprio, known for his calm patience, lifts his gaze with quiet disbelief. The judge hasn't said a word yet, hasn't announced a fine or even asked a question, but this man has already decided the outcome. He believes he's above the law, above consequence, above respect. He folds his arms, leans back, and smirks as though daring the court to challenge him. But he's about to learn what arrogance costs in a place where accountability is the only language that matters. What follows is not just a fine or a suspension. It's a lesson in humility that will leave everyone watching in stunned silence. Because when pride walks into Judge Caprio's courtroom, it rarely walks out the same way. If you think justice should be fair but firm, and that respect should never be optional, then this story is for you. You're about to witness what happens when ego collides with reason, and loses. Before we begin, hit subscribe and turn on notifications for real judge stories, where true courtroom moments meet real consequences. And tell us in the comments, what do you think should happen when someone openly defies a judge? Should patience have limits, or should compassion always come first? The courtroom settles into a stunned quiet, but the tension lingers like heat after a lightning strike. Judge Caprio studies the man before him, a picture of stubborn pride wrapped in a cheap jacket and louder defiance. Every courtroom regular knows that look, the face of someone convinced the world owes them more than accountability. The man adjusts his stance as if preparing for battle rather than judgment. He thinks this is just another ordinary traffic hearing. He has no idea it will become a turning point he'll remember for the rest of his life. Judge Caprio's voice, calm but edged with command, breaks the silence. He doesn't raise it, he doesn't need to. When Caprio speaks, the weight of decades in the bench carries through every syllable. He begins not with a warning but with a question, one that cuts deeper than any fine ever could. The man smirks, answers with sarcasm, and somewhere between arrogance and ignorance, he seals his own fate. What unfolds next isn't just about a license or a ticket. It's about a man colliding with the very limits of his own ego. And when those limits snap, so does his illusion of control. Before we move deeper into this story, take a moment to subscribe to Real Judge Stories for more moments where pride meets consequence and truth hits harder than any sentence. Comment below, what would you have done if someone challenged a judge before the verdict even began? Would you show restraint, or would you teach them a lesson they'd never forget? It was a gray morning in Providence, the kind that painted the city in muted tones of discipline and patience. Outside, the drizzle softened the noise of traffic. Inside the courthouse, the air was crisp with quiet order. The courtroom clock ticked steadily, a metronome of justice, counting down the seconds before another story unfolded before Judge Caprio's bench. The judge entered with the calm dignity of routine. Decades of service had taught him that every case, no matter how small, carried a story behind it. Some came filled with remorse, others with excuses, but all came with choices that demanded accountability. He adjusted his robe, nodded to the bailiff, and began the morning docket. Each case moved quickly, minor violations, brief apologies, fines paid, lessons learned. But then the door opened and the atmosphere shifted. A man walked in, his expression already defensive, his steps heavy with attitude. He scanned the room as though searching for someone to blame before the hearing had even started. Judge Caprio noticed it instantly, the defiance in his posture, the bitterness in his eyes. There was no nervousness, only pride. The kind that resists correction even when mercy is waiting. No one knew yet that this hearing would spiral far beyond a simple traffic ticket. No one expected it to expose a man's broken pride, or test how far patience could stretch before justice snapped. As the man took his place at the defendant's table, the courtroom's hum faded into stillness. The bailiff called the case. The next few minutes would decide whether this morning ended with understanding, or with consequences no one could take back. The bailiff calls the next case and the man steps forward. His stride carries a mixture of irritation and misplaced confidence, each footfall echoing louder than the last. He doesn't bow his head or glance toward the bench. Instead, he tosses his license on the table with the sharp clack of plastic on wood. His name is Ryan Carter, a contractor by trade and a rebel by temperament. The type who believes that authority bends when he scowls hard enough. Ryan's shoulders are squared, his jaw tight. He wears the expression of someone already convinced the court exists solely to waste his time. His hands never leave his pockets, and even the simple request to remove his hat earns a delayed, exaggerated sigh. The spectators sense it instantly, a storm brewing inside a man who refuses to yield even an inch. Judge Caprio watches quietly, measuring not just the violation before him but the attitude wrapped around it. Years on the bench have taught him that arrogance is louder than evidence, and Ryan's tone already speaks volumes. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," the judge begins evenly. "You're cited for reckless driving, exceeding the limit by 31 miles per hour. Care to explain?" Ryan smirks. "Care to prove it?" A ripple passes through the courtroom. The arrogance lands heavier than the charge itself. Judge Caprio doesn't respond immediately. Silence, he knows, is sometimes the sharpest rebuke. For a moment the two men lock eyes, one testing the limits of patience, the other embodying it. The balance of control shifts, subtle but certain. What neither man realizes yet is that this exchange will open far more than a traffic file. It will expose a pattern of pride that's been steering Ryan's life off course for years. Judge Caprio's tone remains steady, but his eyes narrow slightly, studying Ryan's posture. The crossed arms, the defiant smirk, the way he leans back like a man on trial for a crime he refuses to believe exists. "Mr. Carter," the judge says slowly, "the officer clocked your vehicle at 86 miles per hour in a 55 zone. That's not a small oversight." Ryan shrugs, his words dipped in sarcasm. "Everyone drives that fast on that road. Guess I was just the lucky one you caught." "You were weaving between lanes," the judge replies. "That's not luck. That's danger." Ryan lets out a quiet laugh, the kind meant to sting. "Danger? Come on, Judge. Nobody got hurt. Let's not act like I robbed a bank." The courtroom rustles, a few spectators glance at one another. Judge Caprio folds his hands, waiting for the noise to fade. "Do you believe the law only applies when someone gets hurt, Mr. Carter?" "I believe the law is just another way for the city to make money," Ryan shoots back. The judge's brows lift, but his voice stays calm. "You think this is about money?" "I think it's about control," Ryan says, his words like sparks in dry grass. "You fine people, you suspend their licenses, and somehow we're supposed to thank you for it." For the first time, Caprio's patience is tested. He leans forward. "Mr. Carter, I've seen every kind of excuse in this courtroom. But arrogance disguised as logic, that's a new one." Ryan looks away, lips tightening, pride warring with reason. The bailiff shifts his stance, ready for whatever comes next. The temperature in the room changes, invisible but undeniable. Something in the air says this won't end quietly. Judge Caprio takes a quiet breath before turning to the monitor beside him. "Mr. Carter, let's take a closer look at your driving record," he says. His tone remains calm, but there's a quiet weight behind it, the kind that makes even the most stubborn defendants hesitate. Ryan shifts slightly, his smirk fading. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," the judge continues, scrolling through the file, "this isn't your first time in front of this bench. 3 prior speeding citations in the past 4 years. 1 for reckless driving. And 2 fines that remain unpaid." Ryan scoffs, "That's ancient history." "Not to the court," Judge Caprio replies. "Unpaid fines don't vanish with time. They're reminders of responsibility avoided." The courtroom is still. Even the sound of paper turning feels sharp against the silence. Caprio glances up, meeting Ryan's stare again. "Is it true you lost your job last year after multiple absences?" Ryan stiffens. "That's personal. It became public when it appeared in your employment report," the judge says evenly. "And according to that report, gambling was a factor. Is that correct?" Ryan's jaw locks, his eyes dart toward the floor. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know patterns," Caprio answers softly. "And yours shows a man running from more than traffic tickets." Ryan's silence stretches. The courtroom feels colder now, the weight of truth settling like fog. Caprio's voice softens, almost sympathetic. "Sometimes, Mr. Carter, the problem isn't the system chasing you, it's you running from yourself." Ryan looks up, eyes flaring, pride rearming itself like a shield. "I'm not the problem, Judge. I'm just tired of being treated like one." The tension returns, sharper than before. The calm before the storm is over. Ryan's restraint finally snaps. The calm mask cracks and frustration spills out like gasoline on fire. "You know what, Judge? I'm tired of this lecture," he says, voice rising, cutting through the stillness of the courtroom. "Every time I'm in here it's the same story, someone in a robe pretending to understand my life." The spectators stiffen. The bailiff straightens. Judge Caprio doesn't move, his expression unchanged, though the energy in the room now trembles. "Mr. Carter," he says quietly, "I suggest you watch your tone." But Ryan is past suggestion. "My tone? My tone doesn't pay your bills, Judge. My taxes do. So, forgive me if I don't bow down every time someone waves a ticket in my face." A murmur ripples through the courtroom. The arrogance is staggering, but it's more than pride now, it's pain disguised as defiance. Caprio's eyes soften just slightly, the way they often do before delivering the kind of truth that cuts deeper than any fine. "Mr. Carter, paying taxes doesn't excuse breaking the law," he says evenly. "That's not how responsibility works." Ryan steps forward, hands clenched. "Responsibility? I've been responsible all my life. I worked, I paid bills, I did everything right, and what did I get? Nothing but people waiting for me to fail." His voice cracks slightly, anger bleeding into desperation. The courtroom sees it now, the frustration of a man who's been losing control long before this day. Caprio leans back slowly. "So today's your chance," he says. "To decide whether you'll keep fighting the world, or finally face yourself." Ryan glares at him, breathing heavy, pride still holding him upright. He doesn't know it yet, but the next few words from the judge will change everything. Judge Caprio exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries decades of patience. The courtroom feels frozen, suspended in that quiet second before justice speaks. When his voice returns, it isn't loud, but it's sharp enough to slice through Ryan's arrogance like a blade. "Mr. Carter," he begins, "this courtroom is not a stage for your resentment. You came here today facing a simple citation, yet you've turned it into a declaration of war against accountability." He pauses, letting the weight of his words linger. "I was prepared to be lenient. I was ready to listen. But what you've shown me is not frustration, it's contempt." Ryan's jaw tightens, but the smirk is gone. The bravado that once filled the room now feels smaller, weaker. Judge Caprio continues, voice steady as stone. "I have no interest in humiliating you. My job is to remind you that law without respect becomes chaos. And right now, your behavior is proof of that." He glances at the clerk. The fine for reckless driving remains $350. However, the pause lands like thunder. "Your deliberate disrespect and refusal to cooperate add an additional $200 for contempt. Total, $550. Ryan's face drains of color. "You can't be serious." "I am," Caprio replies, eyes unflinching. "And because of your prior unpaid fines and repeated violations, your license is hereby suspended for 90 days. The words land heavy, final. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. Ryan's lips part, but no sound follows. The reality of consequence finally finds its way past the pride. Judge Caprio leans forward slightly. "Maybe 90 days without the wheel will give you time to steer your life in a better direction." Silence follows, the kind that only truth can create. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Ryan doesn't have an answer. The man who once spoke over everyone now stands surrounded by his own silence. His chest rises and falls, his breath shallow, his pride deflating like a balloon losing air. The echo of the judge's words, "License suspended, $550, 90 days, replays in his mind like a verdict from life itself. He looks around the room, searching for something to anchor himself to, but finds only the weight of eyes watching him. Some look with pity, others with quiet satisfaction. The bailiff remains still, his expression unreadable. The courtroom feels smaller now, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves have leaned in to witness his fall. Judge Caprio writes something on the docket, his voice calm again. "Mr. Carter, this is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to wake you up." Ryan finally speaks, but the fire is gone. "You don't understand," he mutters. "I've already lost enough." The judge looks up. "Then stop adding to the list." Those words hang in the air, heavy and clear. Ryan's throat tightens, and for the briefest moment, the defiance in his eyes flickers into something more human, regret. He nods faintly, almost to himself, as if realizing that this moment isn't just about a ticket or a license. It's about the road he's been speeding down his entire life, the one that never led anywhere but back to this kind of reckoning. The bailiff steps forward gently, gesturing toward the exit. Ryan doesn't argue. He just turns, his steps slower now, the sound of his shoes on tile no longer sharp, but hollow, humbled. Judge Caprio sits back, the gavel resting silently beside him. The storm has passed, but what lingers is heavier than sound, reflection. His voice softens, not as an enforcer, but as a teacher who understands that real justice often begins where anger ends. "Mr. Carter," he says, You're not the first man to walk into this courtroom angry at the world. And you won't be the last. But there's a difference between a system being unfair and a person refusing to take responsibility. You can't control every obstacle, but you can control how you respond to it. Ryan listens quietly, his head bowed slightly, the arrogance that once armored him now replaced by something raw, recognition. Caprio continues, "You see, humility isn't weakness. It's the moment a person decides that growth matters more than ego. The moment a mistake becomes a lesson instead of a habit." The courtroom is silent, every word echoing like a slow drumbeat of truth. Even the bailiff, hardened by routine, seems to listen differently. Caprio leans forward slightly. "You can fix your record, Mr. Carter. You can pay your fines. But what matters most is fixing the part of you that keeps finding reasons to rebel instead of reasons to improve." Ryan nods once, not out of obligation but out of understanding. The judge's words strike something deeper than punishment. They reach conscience. Caprio's voice lowers to a near whisper. "Redemption doesn't start when others forgive you, Mr. Carter. It starts when you forgive yourself enough to change." And with that, the gavel falls not as a weapon of judgment, but as a reminder that even the hardest lessons are meant to rebuild, not destroy. The camera lingers on the empty bench as Judge Caprio exits, his footsteps fading into quiet reverence. The echo feels almost symbolic. Justice delivered, pride humbled, lesson learned. The courtroom slowly empties, but the words still hang in the air like the final note of a song that refuses to end. Ryan Carter walks out into the gray morning he came in from, but everything feels different now. The same drizzle falls, yet it doesn't cool him, it cleanses him. For the first time in a long while, silence doesn't feel like punishment, it feels like possibility. The city hums around him, unaware of the small redemption that just began inside those courtroom walls. The narrator's voice returns, gentle but clear. Accountability isn't about shame, it's about growth. Every wrong turn can still lead somewhere right if we have the courage to admit we were lost. And sometimes it takes a judge's patience to remind us that humility is not defeat, it's the start of rebuilding. The music swells softly under the final lines. If you believe real change begins with responsibility, then don't just watch, reflect. Comment below what lesson you think Ryan needed most today: respect, patience, or forgiveness. And remember, every story like this carries a truth we all share. A moment of pause follows, then the narrator concludes with calm authority. Subscribe to Real Judge Stories for more moments where justice meets humanity, and where words spoken in anger become lessons whispered in grace. Because in Judge Caprio's courtroom, punishment isn't the goal, understanding is. The screen fades to black, leaving only the quiet echo of the gavel and a line that stays with the viewer: "When arrogance drives, humility must take the wheel."